Social network of digital double. Sorry about that. Um, it may be a misnomer. I mean, you can tell me after the talk, but the basic idea was to use digital doubles as, yeah, they are sort of representing the people that they're doubling, but then when they fall into some sort of like space where they don't know something about them, they can mark that as interesting or important and go back and survey them. So the idea is that the person would have an app and there would be a continuous feedback loop between the digital double and the person, and starting to think about what are the possible consequences of that. So I'll just present it as like a survey project. This is how it would start. So I would go out and get a representative sample of 50 or 100 or 1,000 people, probably start small, and probably start non-representative. And go to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, so first, this is an idea I fielded a while ago where instead of starting with questions that I define, I start with asking people for questions. So first 5 minutes, I ask them to do three things about themselves. One, think of a word or phrase that describes them. Secondly, what's one thing you wish people could agree on? So I'm thinking of this maybe as goals for the system of what it would try to find consensus on. This is later down the line. And the third one, state something you believe, but which is not universally believed. So these are three just statements, text that they would write in. And then in the second stage, these questions are sort of fed back to the same respondents. So would you describe yourself in the following way? This is the descriptive. So Republican, Democrat would fall into this, or coffee drinker. Which of these two goals is more important? This gives some sort of ranking of a value system. And then, yeah, do you agree? So then querying people about beliefs that one person said that they hold. And this is just sort of a starting point. Then the survey would go into an interactive question answer sort of thing where we would have an LLM sort of producing follow-up questions, really trying to optimize for like getting unsolicited responses. So this is a free form interview. Ideally, the LLM would be able to sort of hit some sort of nerve, ask them to elaborate on something which they have a lot to say about, get them talking about something that's important to them. And also thinking about perhaps in this section, reflecting other people's reasons back on that person. So saying, you believe this, others may say for a reason that they don't believe it, this other thing, and then getting free form response. Yeah, and then a short of like reflection on the survey. So the whole thing maybe lasts 45 minutes for an initial intake interview. So now the part of actually creating the digital double. And this is a system which I've sort of come to after a lot of experimentation that I think works well in retrieving unstructured semantic information about people, which is that we take all that unstructured conversational data, which they may be saying all kinds of things, and process it, reflect on it using an LLM to generate hypothetical question answer pairs, where it thinks if it asked you, if somebody asked you X question, you would give Y response. And then store these question answer pairs into a vector search database. So the key is the question, and we can look up the answer and why. It would also have a link right to the original transcript of why it thinks you would answer it that way. So these hypothetical question answer pairs are sort of part of the inference that's happening within the digital twin, and there would be a lot of that. So I guess the next part is talking. Actually, the next part is talking about how to retrieve this. So in conversation, a similar but different process happens where we have some conversation data and we want to figure out what that person would say next. So then internally, the LLM starts posing questions to the hypothetical person. So it's thinking it's just itself interviewing this person. It's then takes these question answer pairs, goes to the vector search database. Maybe there's relevant questions, maybe there's not. It looks at the answers to those, sees whether it feels comfortable interacting in the original conversation. If not, maybe it searches again. And really important for this process, there's this out where it can give up and say, really, I don't know what the person would say in this situation. So there's sort of a potential for a brick wall there. Otherwise, it sort of does this long search and it can add this new question answer pair to the QA, the vector search database. Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, what's the high level goal of this system? Like what problem does it want to solve?
This system right here is internal to the digital twin. The only problem is that we have a bunch of unstructured text data, and we want to be able to use that in conversation in a scalable way. So we want it to be able to know how to respond or answer in a situation, given all of these other conversations it's had with the real person.
Okay, so it's like you want a large language model to be able to basically process the conversational data generated by some human and be able to answer questions about maybe this specific conversation or the beliefs that the person have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I've done this. I haven't actually modeled a real person yet. I'm in the process of using this to model like famous intellectuals that have a lot of written discourse on them. So we have like 50 books that they've written. How do we process that into it would be the same process where we put it into a QA database, which sort of expands itself as it's retrieving information. But I have done it for like hypothetical characters where instead of giving up here where it's unknown, it goes into like an imagination phase where it invents new features of itself. But that's aside. So this really is trying to reflect most, actually, I guess I had this here. The twins are trying to best represent what they know about the person that they're the dual to through this self-reflection module. It would, whenever it hits one of these brick walls that it doesn't know something, it can kind of mark that as interesting. It's something which it wished it knew in conversation about the person that it wasn't able to retrieve. So suddenly we have a candidate or something to go back to that person and ask. But yeah, also twins, once you have this conversational module, you can have them interact with each other. People from the public could interact with these twins, so not just survey respondents. And they can participate in panel discussions. I'll talk about them in that next slide. Yep. Yeah. Like instead of just putting it in one prompt or something.
It just feels like go and answer the why not just like sample from the like it's like the way that you have set question and answer. Why do you need to generate something? Why can't it just bring someone's answer from the database rather than
from the raw transcripts?
Yeah, I think it's more a question about like what do you want to achieve. The way that I see it now, basically you run a bunch of surveys, you have some on this set of knowledge that you have, and then basically the DLM is gonna do the missing parts, right? That's basically it.
Well, it's trying to that actually all was just trying to stay within the bounds of what the conversation said. And you can just imagine it as like semantic compression, that it's taking what otherwise, they're in a long interview, you may be referencing ideas that happened earlier, you may be using vague or like language which wouldn't make sense out of context.
But
This is a way to, yeah.
But when I interact with that system, I'm going to ask the same question that you asked in the survey.
No.
But I can ask something that's totally unrelated. Like I can ask what they think about supervisor or something.
No.
Or just
Well, you can ask that, but it would hit this brick wall. So it tries to also have like an idea of the bounds of its own knowledge about that person. If that makes sense.
the way that we better with this just looking at the survey, do you think that there are questions that are related that haven't been asked. Like, it's not, I guess I'm missing the point, like, what's the goal of interacting with this? Like, what type of question would they ask that system? That is not been in the survey.
Well, the idea here is actually that the question asking, it's not necessarily you would sit with a person and ask a self-contained question. You're actually just interacting with that twin. But on this side, it sort of realizes it doesn't have in its context window any information that helps it to, it needs to know something about that person before it can answer. Then it goes into this process, just to basically pull out the relevant pieces from prior interactions of what it knows about that person in order to interact in conversation. So in the conversation, it may simply reply yes or no, whereas behind the scenes, it's looking over all of the semantic data that it has about the person.
Hey, Alec, I've got a question. This is James Evans. Hi. Sorry, I would be there in person if I was in town. I'm in Italy. I've got one use case that feels a little less sci-fi in this context is like is imagine that you have a digital twin that will attend meetings on your behalf, right? And so you can imagine they have your preferences, they have whatever, they attend the meeting, they take notes. Now imagine that it's a more sophisticated bot and the meeting requires someone to express your opinion. And so your digital twin does that job. Not only do they take notes, they also express your opinion. So they're part of a meeting which in which opinions are expressed or negotiations occur, which I would say is like almost every faculty meeting that I'm part of. People are trying to persuade other people of certain cases or positions. And sometimes they effectively do that, and other times, probably most of the time, they don't. So the idea is in that setting, it's almost certain that your digital twin would no longer match you after enough experiences, right? I mean, if it was effective at not only conveying your opinion, but being persuaded, like you might be persuaded over a particular argument, then by the time it reaches you again, even if it's a single meeting, it's no longer going to have exactly the same view that you had. And in fact, to sync up, with your digital twin, you'll need to learn what it learned, or need to make its case to you. So at least for me, that feels like a very natural justification for this kind of broader framework is of course every AI company is creating twins that can be your research assistants and can behave on your behalf and in the end will be able to transact on your behalf. But many of those transactions and influence related meetings are places where ideas change. They change people's opinions, and if we don't want just totally inert agents walking around out there, then there's going to have to be a complex process of reintegration, which I think is, so I was chatting with folks at Google about this who had a calendar app, that was trying to do some of these things. And then we faced this challenge of if they don't update and evolve, then those will be like the most boring meetings ever. They'll just be like the beginning of the faculty meeting or whatever, when everyone has an opinion and no one is willing to be persuaded by anybody else. You know what I mean? It would make the world a nightmare if they did not evolve. So anyway, just I think that's for me, that's a justification of the broader kind of program that it seems to me you're involved with here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the original idea of this spawned out of the impetus to find a panel for just seeing what Republicans and Democrats and other parties believe. And I know, recognizing that is quite diverse. So we want to have sort of a representation of that diversity. But of course, in this context of political beliefs, we want people to use critical thinking, evidence to change, to update their beliefs. So I'm am most excited about and interested in the points where your digital twin is surprised or excited or learns something new or changes their mind based on underlying principles. And I can imagine that sort of just being then a notification in your feed that out of the, in this context, maybe there's your digital twin had 300 conversations today. There were a couple really good points that were made that it thinks you should know about. And yeah, I really like this application as well. So it's something a little bit more business oriented. So yeah, I mean, so I was going to talk a little bit about the one nice thing about these twins is that they can sit down for long form survey processes. So there was this paper that came out last month, I think, or a couple months ago, talking about how AI can be used to find common ground in democratic deliberation. They built what they called the Habermas machine, and they basically used LLMs at the point of like the LLM was the mediator trying to build better consensus statements and kept throwing the consensus statements, like things that it thinks the panel of 4 or 5 people would agree with. They give their responses. These are real people, give their responses. It tries to update its consensus statement to try to get to something that it thinks they'll all agree with. This takes a long time, a lot of effort, seems exhausting, but a twin could do this. And, perhaps some process like this, some machine like this could help take diverse opinions on something that's practically important and turn it into actionable consensus. Of course, once the Habermas machine and your simulated twins come to consensus, it would then have to go and ask the real people. But this seems to be sort of an efficiency. Yeah.
Okay, so just so I do here, I guess you have a bunch of LLM agents that are supposed to simulate, like various people in, let's say, a political perspective, and then you have another, I guess, LLM that comes along to try to help these initial LLM agents will like come into not
Yeah.
necessarily agreement, but some form of common ground.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then is the like motivation? Is the motivation for this to then like answer the I guess guy in the middle to like a real life setting?
What the goal, I think, is to bring whatever insights could be garnered from this or whatever consensus statements. Like imagine there's a statement that's important and it's found some common ground among people that otherwise disagree. Then it can go out and reach out to them with those one of those simple questions I asked at the beginning where it's like, do you agree or disagree? And get a very clear binary response. Where the rest of this is all semantic. This would be a way to get to something that's more like 40, we have 80% agreement on this statement. Yeah.
Could you say more about what your motivation is? You kind of jumped right into like, here's the thing we could do. And not a lot on why. And is this, what are you hoping to achieve through the construction of these digital twin interaction networks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I actually put it on my question slide at the end, like what should the goal of this system be? Because it just seems like there's a lot of potential here. So I'm just fishing right now, basically. Yeah.
I think one follow-up question you might ask, of the survey is, you ask the belief and then why do you believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Give an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an explanation? And then I think this, has potential to tap into habits of mind. Why do you believe this? You might agree or disagree. And then another follow-up that you use on a Likert scale is your staunchness. How strongly do you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
And that'll, reveal, that could show the double maybe actually can go into a meeting and argue on your behalf because it understands your logical processes and also how strongly you believe certain things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that sort of playing out in this interactive voice QA, but then also after this survey, I'm imagining the people I've surveyed and paid for this 45 minutes would have access to this app. They could see how their personas are behaving in the wild. Their personas can bring interesting tidbits back to them, and they could have like a feed of new simple questions, but also new elaborations. Like it doesn't seem consistent. Like, the system comes back to you saying, this belief of yours doesn't seem consistent. I know you believe this, this, and this. Can you go into more detail? And you can see how they reconcile those and get a little bit more clarity. Yeah. So, yeah, and I think there's a moment with the AI, with the twin, where you get surprise or confusion. And I think I'm basically trying to profit off that to dig deeper.
Dissonance.
Yeah. So yeah.
Quick one. Is that the goal that the digital twin is going to do something? The digital twin that imitates me is going to do something that I cannot do. Is that the goal? For example, it says AI can help to, make the political discussion more peaceful, let's say.
Yeah,
But maybe I cannot do that,
Yeah.
or a friend of mine cannot.
absolutely.
So is the digital twin that imitates me is going to be able to do that, and how are they going to do that?
Yeah, I mean,
Better.
they at least have the time to do that. I mean, time, energy, effort. I mean, I think there's a huge efficiency argument here that if we get a panel of, 1,000 people, we get this deep semantic information that's being updated and expanded continuously through your interaction with it. I mean, these twins can have thousands of conversations a day with people, potentially having a huge impact. Like they may be very convincing. Your arguments may be convincing to people, for instance.
So what's the role of me here? Like, is it necessary to be a digital twin of me?
I mean,
Yeah.
the thing I find attractive is that it models different versions of me, kind of alternate possibilities of who I could become, maybe, right?
Okay.
And if I think of it that way, then the question is, why do I only have one twin and not a distribution of twins that could have kind of a range of like a possibility space within which, I can act or see, options of how I could.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting agent-based, LLM agent-based model where you've got these initial positions, let's have them interact and see how they change over time. I mean, I really do, my goal was to feed this back into real change in real people. So the respondents and also, the public maybe that comes and interacts with these twins, that they would be interacting with what I can say is a representation of a real person. It's not an imagined or hallucinated person. This is a real person, which I find appealing. But I also like that in a conversation, they could change their mind, somehow like move in a direction or explore things that you may not explore. And then it sort of brings that back to you to see, is this something that you followed? Is this real for you? And we get this feedback loop of like, are the digital twins realistic? I think it's important. Yeah. So I guess it's important to me from the perspective of like this political angle that we're representing real understanding for beliefs population.
I mean, I think the moments that are really interesting is the one that James mentioned, when people update beliefs.
Yeah.
And that people tend to be reluctant to do
Yeah.
so, right? And the LLM might be less reluctant to
Yeah.
do so. And so if I can, kind of follow my own path and see where are the moments where I could have changed updated my position and see, where that leads to.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely. Yeah. Then I think so. The other goal of this is that I think I call it a social network because I think it could be a platform, Facebook-esque, that actually has just like inherent entertainment value to interact with. So the ideal of this whole project, one of the big research questions is this engaging, rewarding for the people that are interacting with it? Yeah.
Right, just so I understand, you're saying the people interacting with other digital agents or the people constructing their agents? Who's being entertained?
Hopefully both. Yeah, but there are these two groups. Yeah, definitely. Because I don't get much, yeah, I don't get the data I want necessarily if they don't continue using the app after that first interview. So if they don't find it valuable to follow their twin in the wild or to get updates about how it's, exploring and interacting with other people, then I don't get this feedback process that I'm portraying here. The agents aren't updated, and actually the whole thing kind of falls flat. But on the other hand, if both the people that are being surveyed and the general public find it interesting, then it's something that could sort of grow, and also these agents would become deeper and deeper over time.
Right. Yeah. I want to interact with Alec McGill, but there's not enough Alec McGills to go around. And so, having a few digital versions floating around that are engaged in, like her, when the jealous kind of boyfriend's like, well, how many conversations you engaged with? And 237, basically. or
How many
whatever.
are you in love with? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I thought about a few possible uses of this. The public was my initial idea, but then I realized that it costs a lot of money to do what I'm planning. So then thinking about how to sell it, I was thinking it'd be good to sell it to politicians. Those, writing speeches could run it through 1,000 agents to get their honest reactions. That, branding, messaging, that kind of stuff seems like a place to get money from. And it doesn't seem to undermine the ethical side of it. And then, of course, research, funding. Yeah, so I don't really know yet about that. Another sort of side of this is that eventually we have all this semantic data that we're processing, but I also showed you sort of agree, disagree questions that it's collecting. There's some logic about what it asks and why, but this gives the ability to actually report percentages, like 75% of Republicans believe X, which could be very useful for some purposes, and you can use sort of traditional survey methods on this stuff. Yeah, so I'll just briefly talk about the ethics of this. I'm not sure how, so definitely I want to be transparent in how the twin is constructed and used. I want to preserve people's anonymity. Like if a person's twin is having 10,000 political conversations in a week, then, I don't want them to be able to be identified for some reason. Also really important, if this is used for political decision-making, then there will be forces that try to get in the way and manipulate it. So that's why I'm thinking of having this panel of 1,000 that I went out and found under the radar, and only letting them actually answer questions that then become twins. But yeah, we need to preserve their anonymity as well, so they can't go be found or hacked or whatever else. I don't know. Yeah, a person would have access to all of the conversations and interactions their twin has, and can dispute them, say I would never say this doesn't make any sense, and we get this really nice feedback loop from the machine learning perspective. Are we actually doing our job? Yeah, all facts are sourced in real conversations, sort of explicitly, or in survey responses, and are updated over time. Everything would be open source. I'm also
A
thinking
quick question about gathering that information. So are you using LLMs to elicit the responses in the first place, kind of like Michael Bernstein and others used LLMs to guide open-ended conversations in their 1,000 Personas project?
absolutely. Yeah, this is partially inspired by that, and that would certainly be part of it. I don't know exactly what the pipeline is. What is an interesting next question is itself an interesting question. It also has value implications. That's why I was thinking a little bit about having them identify goals to drive the system of what do we wish we could agree on, and then you can ask follow-up questions, digging in directions which help those collective goals, but yeah, generally speaking, it would be the LLMs somehow deciding what to ask next. Also, yeah, in conversations with the twin, there are these moments where it realizes it doesn't have the information to adequately interact in this context. If that happens often, you know, we can sort of aggregate those, and that can prioritize new next questions the next time they open up the app. Yeah, and I think we should grow slowly. Like, it's never good to take something that, you know, could be, you know, could alter the way that people make decisions and communicate and scale it, even if it is something that people enjoy. So growing slowly, carefully monitoring it, and allowing them to like erase themselves at any time. That's my ideas now. Yeah.
So I'm not really sure this is. But like, would it make sense to like, I don't know, I guess. Take averages of people's, you know, responses, and I guess like by that in particular is that like, you know, if you're, for example, you know, like. I guess asking questions on one specific topic or something like that, right? Maybe what you could do is you can take, you know, responses from more than just one person and have that thing under which, you know, simulated.
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, in how far my thinking is influenced by the groups I'm part of, or like the famous people, the intellectual traditions they're part of. So there's kind of a meta level to beliefs that feeds into the individual beliefs, and how far you want to draw on that, especially if an individual gets stuck.
Do you mean like interacting with aggregates?
Yeah, but also in terms of where you source the information from, or how you train it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah.
I was gonna, yes, add to something like that. I mean, if it's logging all the data and interactions it has, you know, maybe you could color code, you know, purple. I had a purple conversation with, you know, Anonymous, and it's about politics. But going back to like the beginning, is you ask the person, you know, here are subsets of categories, and who are, you know, influential people you tend to agree with in this category. List Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Noam Chomsky, Bertrand Russell, whatever.
Yeah, and also like, yeah, where do you source your news? They're talking about intellectual traditions. So trying to get, are you trying to get to generalizations that we can make?
Okay, so my goal, to be clear, sorry, I'd like to be back. My like the reason I said why I said was actually also for the sake of the camera.
Oh.
Then, or I don't know what your guys' goal is, so I'm not trying to speak for them. For me, I was kind of thinking that because average like, you know, 20 people or whatever. Like there's not actually one person moving them. Like you have 19 others.
I see what you're saying. So in a conversation about climate change, there are arguments on both sides that people might mobilize, and you would see like a distribution across those in terms of people for or against that use that or argue that, something like that. And then you kind of interact with, so then when it responds, it has a little number indicating this is 10 people that are behind this answer or something like that.
I also really think of it like that, but I think that's a
Just worrying about anonymity. Yeah, anonymity is hard because as people give more and more details about their lives, to the extent that those bear on the conversations we're having, their beliefs, where they are located, like a lot of these, like enough of these factors could triangulate somebody. There are also opinions that are only like held and expressed by a few people in the world. So that sort of thing could identify somebody, but yep.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking a bit about the use case for thinking like, what are we trying to design here? Because to the extent that you want to have this be like a complement or a substitute for a public opinion poll, then yeah, you'd want, you know, Joe Schmo to be simulated. But if it is like like James's thing about like going in and attending your meetings,
Mhm.
to me, it's like, well, maybe you don't actually want, Austin Kozlowski working for you. You want John von Neumann working for you. Like, why simulate like the random schmucks that you happen to have in the office? Like, simulate people who are 2 standard deviations better.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
so
More
the
expensive.
and they already wrote a bunch of books. Like, it's already there. Like,
Yeah.
so if it's like I need these agents to get something done, then I'm no longer convinced that we just want a bunch of random folks.
Yeah.
We want like a super team.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Whereas to the extent that we're trying to simulate public opinion or whatever, or like, consumer market research, these sorts of things, like now you need Joe Schmo again. But
Yeah.
it depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so if you're trying to access knowledge, it's really important to get the right people to simulate the right individuals.
Yeah, if you're trying to like get something done, like we need the best people. Like I don't think that you necessarily just want like 30 John von Neumanns. It would be good to have like different kinds of people with
diversity,
different opinions, but still, like there's a reason why they like bring in the experts. They don't just bring in like, hey, you over there, like come on in, like
Yeah.
join the board of directors. Like you want people who have a certain level of like they're gonna have the best ideas.
Yeah, and I mean, if these people are alive, you have the same feedback process that they can be having 1,000 conversations
Yeah.
across the world or whatever, and there's some interesting new question that you hadn't thought about or isn't in, right, anything that you've written. So then it goes and asks you, you can talk to it. So then you have this sort of decentralized network of experts now.
Yeah.
Steadily collecting information that's, and externalizing it from that individual person. So, I mean, that sounds incredibly useful. And then this can be more of a, learning and knowledge acquisition sort of thing.
So you answer some question through your app that ends up making like $10 million for Meta, and you get like 30 cents and like 3 karma points.
Well,
Woo!
I mean, you have ownership of your AI like twin, so you could have it have a consultant fee, $20 an hour. It would be cheap, but
I wonder how much data do you need to actually train a twin of an actual person, and how much the twin is a reflection of the large language model itself, or like the person who was trained up on. For example, when you are doing this, like say political polls, for example, there is a lot of study saying that large language model generally are left-leaning.
Yeah.
So I think an interesting experiment to do is if you train with your framework on a set of people who are right-leaning, how much data does it need to make the overall, like train the large language model becomes right-leaning groups? So that could provide a good estimation of how much data do you need to train a representation of real people, not a representation of the general tendency of large language model.
I've done this in a simulated way where I generate a backstory, some set of reasons for their beliefs, and do it around all kinds of beliefs, like right and left, and problematic and not problematic. I can't have, like I've had agents fully represent beliefs that you couldn't imagine in ChatGPT, that you couldn't imagine ChatGPT sort of arguing for and represent. Like I've had it be a climate denier. It's very effective at representing, I think, the brick wall that sometimes exists for certain people, again, for different reasons. So the coal miner and the lobbyist have different sort of sets of things that are going on in their head. But yeah, the twins representation is always going to be. So how much data do you need to fully encapsulate a person? That's I don't know if you're ever going to get enough data. So then it's kind of like prioritizing this feedback loop to expand it in the right ways, like your information about the person to represent the twin. Yeah.
So another goal of is like the figure also this point of like the stuff with much apart. So why So why not, so why not really, so, I mean, I think we have this still defined in terms of like, what is this kind of a holding for the pool, or it's more of a self-reflection. But if you put, let's say, okay, I want this to be a self-reflection, then that's what you might want to study. I think. What you want to study is how people change after throughout the day. And then you can maybe, instead of thinking of like very broad terms, think of a very specific problem. So, say, this is a bad example, but for example, you say, let's say you meet the ethic market, right? So you go out to ask people about their behavior, that is some kind of a persona for bargaining person. And you let them, the individual, watch how they would act in a bargaining situation. You see whether they update change their behavior to keep what it's similar to meditation, right? Basically, thinking you learn about what you would do in different situation, and then you can see if there's any change in your behavior after you observe it. Which I think is different from the group goals.
Yeah.
Explicitly stated. People or create super. It's more about you learning about yourself through basically exploring yourself in different situation, which is something people do in their imagination, but
Absolutely.
you reduce the cognitive.
Yeah, and you can only think of a few things at a time, like keep a few things in your head at a time, whereas this thing can sort of, have a peppering ball, what you told it over time.
Yeah, but then if you could think of a nice, like, very contrived example where you can explore this, I think that would be super. If you can find, here is a case where, I basically simulate you, I let you see 100 games of you or whatever it is, and see if you can learn and do it in some sense. And that should be better than just seeing someone else. People just probably sense.
I was thinking of the same case connected with Austin's point about the von Neumann. And at what point is kind of an imagined version of myself so far away from me that I can't learn anymore because I needed to be closer to my randomness, right? Whatever they came up with, right?
Yeah, there'd be this like this syncing process that has to happen. Lest your twin get away from you like that. So yeah, I mean, I thought of this because a friend, is working on a project where they're helping the German government with their AI. Something which just gives them information about the parties, but he wanted to bridge it with my work building personas and simulate, a voter of X party, a voter of Y party, whatsoever. The deadline for that's way too quick, but I just really like the idea and wanted to stop imagining personas and start actually going and trying to, get representations of real individuals. So I first thought of this in the political arena, and I think there's money there, but it also sounds like it could be a self-help tool. It sounds like it could be something of a productivity tool. It could be a learning tool. It could be a consulting, virtual consulting tool. So yeah, I mean, and all of these seem to interact or like be conducive to each other's. Yeah, again, I have this like, what should the underlying goal of the system be? My first intention was just like, we want to take what are unfounded beliefs about important things and turn them into something that are coherent and agreed upon across society so that we can get to something of like productive consensus. This is social change, this is politics. But yeah, I don't know, I really appreciate your ideas here.
Have you tried this to see if it actually works and is useful for a mini case?
No. I just scoped it out this weekend. I've interacted with these simulated or emulated personas. And I have also, like I had a therapy app where I used this sort of QA thing for it to internalize
Yeah.
you like trying to understand you. And yeah, that was sort of the key. It seems to do pretty well. So I would be excited to put it all together. See what happens.
Why don't you think of like video game setting where you have large language model and PCs that can customize their behavior based on the past conversation and interactions with the players, things like that.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think you should prototype it up yourself.
Yeah.
Make Alec bot and then like.
Oh, and then the
chat with
Alec bot can go out and try
send
to talk
Alec
about
bot
this
to a
idea.
meeting, see if it works.
Yeah.
Like you are kind of the best judge of Alec bot.
That's true.
Like, and like you've got all the data.
That's
You've
true.
got more data on Alec than anybody except Google, who knows even more about you than you do. But
That's a great idea.
it'd start there.
Yeah, and then it could just be interacting with people talking about this project and other things, but yes, that feedback loop's useful for me.
Also participation in education and review this really like conversations. So like I just feel like sometimes people are discussing about scientific questions or teaching and then a very formal and a very open teacher is that we don't understand or which part they don't understand.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that should be useful to expect like what the student doesn't understand.
Yeah, give more of a personalized education. It also helps to know, know what a person knows well in order to communicate with them. Like if you want to communicate something across, you sort of have to know what languages you can speak to that person. If they know welding or something, you can make an analogy. That sort of thing could be useful in a more general sense.
Sorry if I missed this, but how is it that you're identifying places where the model or the persona doesn't have a good answer and like it feels uncertainty? Because I was like, an original thing LLM struggled with a lot was just hallucinating and saying confidently bullshit when it doesn't know. And like now models, state-of-the-art ones are more often like, I'm not so sure about that. Like, whoa, how'd they do that? But I feel like it's still a bit of a trade secret. Like, I don't know. Like there's some people think that like the entropy of the responses and like the way uncertainty is spread across them is an indicator, but like I don't know. Do you have a good idea methodologically of how do you find the places where the LLM knows what it's talking about versus just making stuff up?
No, I would love to think more deeply about that. I mean, my idea was here.
Okay, so
It's simply that it can't find it in its current
it's doing
knowledge
just RAG.
organization.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
RAG. And the
Gotcha.
way that you keep it within knowledge bounds is just prompt engineering, where you say,
Yeah,
don't take anything outside of, and put clear boundaries.
that
around
is such a limitation though, because what LLMs are really good at is interpolation. And maybe you said
Mhm.
this thing A, you said this thing B, and really there's kind of like a coherent C between
Yeah.
A and B that the LLM could generate without there
Yeah.
being a specific like thing in the database. So it's
Yeah.
sort of a shame to like ablate that capability. But yeah, it's hard to know what's the middle ground between like allowing it to creatively interpolate without allowing it to just hallucinate wildly.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, so you first of all, just prompt engineering, you can tune how strict it is. You can, using words like, if you can infer from these, taking notes about them. And we can mark things as being inferences. But this stage in my invented personas, it would do that. It would take what it knows about the person and creatively interpolate, which it did very well at. It was able to build sort of a consistent and deep persona. So yeah, I think that's a design decision, but I also think there must be better methodological structures for that. Like what does certainty look like here?
I think it's a big part of one thing everyone cares about is like being healthy shape. Almost a system built that on what because you're always fitting the initial answers with
Well,
It's gonna change, it's gonna change, like, it's gonna do like small interpolation, but it's not gonna be able to. Or it doesn't seem to be designed for just. Anything about it, learn how, I guess, or maybe get this, have a good survey, but I don't know what's exactly. How you learn about how people change their beliefs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can see their beliefs. So if they have more conversations, you can see their beliefs changing in conversation, although that's very rare in most beliefs. But yeah, I generally think of the knowledge store as being updated only with the permission and direction of the person. So it's only in this like knowledge retrieval stage that I'm super strict, put a tight bound around what we already know, and then mark where the bounds were, like what were the questions that kept being asked internally that couldn't be answered, and then try to bring that back to the person to generate a more substantial internal representation.
So the change is gonna come only from the person's kind of proving that.
Yeah,
But it's not great for everybody like this.
I think it is. So I had imagined.
It's still costly. To go to entire sample.
What do you mean? Like it's costly. I kind of imagine that the twin ideally would be able to find really compelling cases for change within your own framework. So it would take things that it already knows that you believe, and sort of through conversations with others, it may actually change its mind. Then it can bring this sort of back to you and have a conversation with you about this new idea it had or this new connection it made. Then this conversational data sort of goes through this same process. This one. Yeah, to go into
Maybe it's my basic model of how it might work, but it seems like, let's say you go out, you ask people about describe themselves, they get a persona, you can go into the system, and then you want to see how they will change, their mind given a sentence or given a argument, right? But then all of the parts where they change their mind is going to come from the training data. Or just like, it's not something that you provide. So in a sense, you don't get a lot about learning about how people change behavior over just using state vanilla models. It already incorporates that information. Basically, you borrow that information from, in the best case scenario, you will borrow that information from already trained models. So they said it was trained on Reddit. All the people who change their mind on Reddit, basically. Yeah, or it's not something that is coming from the design of the, unless the survey itself is going to tell you something about how people change it. It's something you also have to learn from the person.
I think one thing it could do when it comes back to the person is agree, disagree, support or reduce, like reinforce my belief, reduce my belief. When it comes back and says, I interacted with blah, blah, blah. Do you agree with, this outline of something we talked about earlier? And then the person can say, agree or disagree, just neutral, or reinforce or reduce that belief about
So that's a stage before you even check the perspective. You train your LLM to understand how people change from the belief from that kind of different direction. Yeah. And then, that's not learning.
Yeah, I had imagined that when you're answering those just agree, disagree, it would sort of show, you disagreed with this and have little maybe icons for the personas that agreed with an option to argue with them about it. So like an option in the app to initiate a debate over something. Then you at least get simulations with twins, between humans and twins, or twins could engage with each other in the same sort of thing, which, the personas, the fictional personas I was building before, the idea was that they would be resistant to change, but open to having a conversation, and they were difficult, but not impossible, to change their mind. Although this varied. So like a climate scientist, no matter what you throw at them, they're not going to relinquish their belief that, you know, the climate change is an important pressing topic for today's age or whatever.
So,
But
so
yeah.
Alec, do you have examples? I mean, do you have examples of this persuasion process? I mean, some of us in the room, virtually or you know, in person, have run experiments, you know, with you know, LLMs that are more or less persuasive on different topics. Have you run some of these simulations, or is this still in design, imagine phase?
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly a demo, in demo stage, but like there is something online, Diplomatica.ai, where you can, you go in and interact with people on simulated fake people. So
I didn't mean to derail everything. I just was just curious if you had any stats or anything about this.
no, I don't have any stats, and I think, yeah, this is also yeah, something I haven't systematically tested for. I know, like, I've done a lot of just prompt engineering to try to get it a little bit better. We switched to a different GPT model, and I think it got a little bit more artificial. But you know, it still has some of the qualities that I was describing, that they are convincible, although it's difficult. And yeah, you'll have to excuse the sort of contrived cases, although I think now there's a way to make a custom bot, if you want to try that. So yeah, this may be just helpful in thinking about this. The AIs that are in this system actually just have, it's the same as the 1,000 Personas study, where they just have like a long prompt about their backstory, that why they believe things, who they are, how they should behave, and then they simulate the conversation. So it's pretty basic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, I think empirically, just to see, you know, how much are people persuaded by you know, agents, how much are agents persuaded by, I mean, just some of the asymmetries that, you know, are kind of underlying assumptions regarding these, you know, the impact of these conversations. I think it'd be an interesting social scientific question to kind of answer.
Yeah. There was
but-
that study about conspiracy theorists, I think we talked about, where the just in a one-shot conversation was able to change people's minds to a durable way. So that's
David Rand and colleagues, sure.
yeah, it's a good sign, but it's like, yeah, the asymmetry is very interesting. Like, some people just cannot be convinced, and some for good reasons, and some for bad reasons. So that would be very interesting to look. And it's kind of, it's also an idea, like, around building consensus. If we can find that even the people that disagree with this statement, if we engage them in a diplomatic conversation, the real people in a diplomatic conversation around it, and present the right arguments, that we can always convince them. If there is this feature that those that disagree, it turns out, just don't have enough understanding or knowledge or the right ideas around it, then I think that's really important for generating consensus and figuring out which arguments are effective for different people. So it's an hour.
Do we have, I mean, just a final question on this. So have you seen any examples where, you know, LLMs do find novel, you know, not consensuses, but kind of like, you know, novel broaches between divergent opinions, which is different from just kind of like talking someone down from a conspiracy theory. It's kind of like two people have different values, and proposes a theory or I mean a policy that satisfies them both. I think that's part of the space which I think feels possible here with non-polarized LLM agents, but I haven't actually seen a compelling example of.
Yeah, I mean, in just basic examples I've run, if you put two agents together and put them on opposite sides of an issue and have them have a long discussion, they'll eventually just start talking about how, we need to keep this discussion open. It's great to be talking, so they just sort of agree the conversation is useful. Or, yeah, they'll come to a very banal, sort of super low level agreement, something like that. So, yeah, but that was a long time ago. It'd be interesting to dig deeper. And yeah, these sort of novelties are what I think would be the actual value I would bring to users, that you can bring back something that they haven't thought about.
Right. Yeah, no, that seems like a really nice target. So,
Well,
cool. Thanks.
All right, thanks for having me. There's a couple of links in the chat you might want to check out. All right, thanks everybody. Next week, the presenter will be me. Wow. Oh, you all have to listen to what I have to say.